right. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining. Let's get started with our webinar. It's Accelerate Onboarding with Smarter Identity Verification. Let's go over the legal slide. Just real quickly, this presentation contains general information only. It's not a legal or professional advice. So for guidance specific to your situation, please consult a qualified advisor. G2 Web Services is not responsible for any loss or damage resulting from use of this content. Alrighty, now to the housekeeping slide. If you have any questions, please submit them via webinar questions panel. If we don't have time to answer them, we will make sure to follow up with you via email. Check out the handout section of your control panel for additional info. And then also this recording will be shared with you in the next couple of days. So if it merits sharing with someone on your team, you'll be able to do so. All right, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Ina Mirzahanova. I've been in risk management for about 18 years, working across client engagement and operational strategy. I joined G2 about 8 years ago, where initially I focused on the bankruptcy side of business, but these days I lead our global customer success team and I oversee the entire client portfolio. And now to introduce our speaker and the subject matter on today's topic, Sergei Sergejev leads product management for identity verification solution at G2 Risk Solutions. His background is in business development and operations. He has built and led sales, customer success, product teams, and eventually he's become the managing director of the KYC startup. I'll quickly go over our agenda slide before we get started. To kick things off, we'll start with the fundamentals of Know Your Customer, or as most people know it, KYC. We'll explore how smarter onboarding can reduce manual effort and how technologies like biometrics and AI are being used to detect and prevent fraud. By the end of the session, you'll have a very clear view of how these tools can streamline compliance and, more importantly, enhance your customer trust. All right, on to you, Sergei.
Thank you, Ina. And yeah, hi, everyone. It's obviously a pleasure to be able to present in front of this audience today as a subject matter expert. And without further ado, we will first begin with setting the ground of what we're going to be discussing today. And first, let's get through the framework that is usually called as Know Your Customer, or KYC, what it's about, who it applies to, and where identity verification solutions can actually be a make or break for your business. So what is KYC? In general, KYC is an umbrella term that encompasses everything around customer identification and also relevant obligation, like the assessment of the risk profile of the person or a company that is being onboarded. Long story short, in order to effectively combat money laundering and also terrorism financing and fraud across the globe, companies are obliged to know who they provide the services to. And also oftentimes those requirements are overlapping or even are the nature of the business. For instance, if we're talking about car lending services, for instance, like you can rent the car in services like Bolt or Turo in US. When I was there, I used that. It is just the nature of the business to at least ask the driver license of the person driving the car. What also makes it so important is of course, the requirements and automation of the processes are very important for the effective operations of your business. Generally, for the longest time, there's obviously a bit of a battle with the regulatory compliance, where you need to comply with the requirements, and also operational efficiency that you need to provide to be just effective at what you do and to expand your business. So for the longest time, the countries have been governing just financial sector inside their own country. But with the evolution of international and digital banking, countries have always searched for basically effective means of cooperating with each other to prevent fraud and to catch criminals, basically. So that's how the supranational, so-called supranational institutions were born. And on the screen, you can see FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force, which was actually created by the organization that you might heard, Grand 7, G7. And also we have institutions like, for instance, European Central Bank, that basically under the supervision of those authorities in today's day and age, the national authorities are then adopting those frameworks that they create and create their own national laws and regulations that are then being enforced on the national level, pretty much. And in compliance with international standards, often can lead to different sanctions, and basically countries that are signed up for FATF or ECB may be prohibited from financial operations with that country because it's deemed too risky. Of course, as I mentioned, there could be just natural reasons for the company to use KYC solutions because everybody is onboarding customers. And when you deal that, automation obviously helps with cutting the costs, just processing more and faster. And verification solutions, they also build trust among your customers, as simple as that, because that is important nowadays as a standard expectation. And it is especially applicable in the environments where peer-to-peer activity is happening, such as, for instance, trading on the marketplace where one person is trading with another or buying something from them. So who needs it, and rather who is obliged to be compliant with those regulations? Typically, the regulations are applied for the institutions that are either providing financial services associated with just natural risks of money laundering or just theft, or also they can be applied to the industries working with sensitive data. For instance, in some cases, the additional requirements are set to specific even type of data when it comes to regulations. So a example of that could be, for instance, healthcare, and an additional requirement could be that certain countries actually require the healthcare data to be processed only within the border of the country of the resident or the citizen. There are also numerous cases where the effective and accurate onboarding and also fraud detection tools are just a simply good investment. And yeah, it comes regardless of the regulations. An example I can give is that every company nowadays, there is usually some spendings and also reimbursements that need to be properly filed. Employees are sending invoices and receipts, and at certain point when the company becomes big enough, processing those and also making sure that no fraud is happening becoming a problem. And we actually had a few cases where I've been approached specifically on that topic, and it become even more sensitive because it in that specific case we were talking about also taxpayer money, i.e. public funding for the entity in question. And we also can talk about different application. For instance, universities, every year there is admissions period, and once that begins, effective KYC, effective processing of the data, and also being able to tell that the documents that are sent to the admissions board is correct. There's no fraud or editing made on them. This can be all done nowadays completely digitally, completely replacing the standard process, which we say seen for decades, where information needs to be notarized, sent by email and letters, and it all takes time. And it's, of course, costly all across the board for the students to get everything notarized, and then for the admissions board to actually process everything over the, let's say, short period of time that they actually have. And yeah, being able to tell whether the documents are fake, both for the invoices, receipts, and other ones is proving to be important. So when do you need KYC? Of course, that is usually at onboarding, but realistically, it's constantly throughout the life cycle of the customer, or rather for as long as they are an active user. As KYC obligations always come with a caveat of keeping up to date, and it's pretty vague in terms of what does it actually mean. But yeah, there are generally this requirement that you always have to know the latest information on your customer. When we're talking about KYC as a whole, there are two specific terms that you can see highlighted in the white box because they really define the process by a lot and go always hand in hand when it comes to onboarding and ongoing monitoring of the person to be able to tell the risk. So trigger-based events are specific rules and thresholds that are set in the regulations where specific KYC events need to happen. Risk-based approach is basically a framework where, regulators recognize that not all services are equal, and also not all customers are equal, and therefore they just bear lower risks than somebody else. And thus they allow companies to implement lower barriers of entrance or lower thresholds in order to be actually capable of providing the service to that customer. They always come in hand. And yeah, for instance, when you're onboarding a person to a platform, oftentimes there is a requirement for the, let's say, basic information that you have to collect as the minimum acceptance level. That usually comes just for the registration, and oftentimes that is enough to be able to onboard that customer. But when there actually is a threshold or an action, such as, for instance, the customer wants to top up their account with a credit card, or if they're actually withdrawing money, that's when their risk changes, triggers happen, and that's just an instance when specific thresholds are actually defining what you do. For instance, a customer that sends 100 euros on a platform that is doing, for instance, only domestic transfers is definitely not the same as somebody doing an international transaction of $100,000. So that is what those frameworks are about. So all in all, when does it take place? Usually, this translates to two specific processes: business onboarding and person onboarding. And for onboarding somebody, be that a business or a person, a company needs to collect a specific list of information on the counterparty, and also verify that information and monitor this information throughout the lifetime of the customer by the requirement of keeping information up to date. For any regulatory institution, regulated institution, sorry, that means that is subject to the AML requirements, you are also obliged to perform the so-called AML PEP sanction checks, which is a check against anti-money laundering and politically exposed people. And when it comes to what we will cover in more detail and specifically today, we're going to discuss the how to effectively onboard persons. And when I say that, I also imply that every onboarding of a company requires verification of person associated with the organizations, such as directors or UBOs. So now let's jump into the meat, I would say. How do we make regulatory compliance and onboarding a simpler task to tackle across the board by implementing effective tools to enable the data processing to reach your compliance and especially operational needs, to make it quick and effective. The golden standards that we're talking about when it comes to onboarding of a person to a financial institution by most regulators is basically on your screen. There are different threshold and requirements of what you actually need to do, and they can vary on the country and industry specifically. But generally, companies are obliged to acquire the scope of data such as name, address, date of birth, and other parameters. And the acceptable means to actually collect this information to be considered as trustworthy is basically either a government issued document. So for example, that could be a passport, an ID card, a driver license, or residence permit in certain cases. Or there's also an option to obtain this information from a reliable third party with adequate KYC measures. What it actually means is that this company has actually verified this user and the information from them is trustworthy. So an example of that would be, for instance, a utility bill from a gas company. So all of those requirements, and as I mentioned before, they all rely on the aforementioned risk-based approach, trigger events. And for instance, when it comes to verification of the address, oftentimes, in my experience, it is delayed to the point where it's actually necessary. So for instance, when the person is actually withdrawing the funds from the platform, or upon reaching specific thresholds set in regulations. The usual threshold is oftentimes $10,000 as the limit. You can now see what I call the usual suspects of KYC for the onboarding and automation of the process. And yeah, they all serve the purpose of giving compliance with the requirements and also specifically reducing the time it takes somebody to go from a prospect to an actual user. And we are going to talk about the services highlighted in the red boxes and how those three specifically help achieving the streamline and increasing the process, improving the process of verification, I should say. Number one, identity document verification. The most global and the most commonly used identity verification solution. It is basically verifying the person's identity through the identity documents such as the passport or identity card. And you can improve on the process by implementing automatic solution, which can automatically and within seconds recognize the type of the document, read all of the information from the document, and also verify that the information is authentic, all done within seconds. And instead of filling forms or other means, all the customer needs to do to basically provide you their data in a way that they instantly become eligible for onboarding is that they need to take a photo of their document. Another thing is EID. And to make it simple, electronic identities is basically just a digital analog of the identification document. So it pretty much replaces the previous product where you take a live photo of the document. When it comes to EIDs, this is basically a pre-verified identity stored usually within your mobile device. And it is commonly used and adopted across European Union so far. And there is a new wave that is literally just behind the corner with the eIDAS 2.0 regulation that is being adopted pretty much as we speak. All the eID services are based mostly on in-person verification with either a bank or a mobile operator. And that basically enables them to create a secure set of credentials that is assigned to your mobile device usually, that validates authenticity of the personal information stored with that credentials. So for the reference, you can see right now on your screen the numbers for Swedish national scheme, which is called Bank ID. And verification is performed by the banks. They are all part of the national schema. And in Sweden, and also in many other countries, from the numbers on your screen, you can see that this method has effectively replaced identity document verification. So how did it actually do it? by simplifying the process. During the process, instead of entering any sort of fields or again taking the photo of the document, which is a bit of a friction, the customer just presses one button, which basically initiates the session that creates a pop-up on their phone. They open up their app, which basically has their identity standing behind it. Then the customer needs to confirm their identity. Let's say 5 years ago, that was usually done through the PIN. Nowadays, we are mostly talking about biometrics such as Face ID and thumbprint that basically serve the purpose of a two-factor authentication to make sure that sharing of this information is actually sanctioned by the user and is not fraudulent. And it's essentially like an authenticator app, but with a actually verified identity standing behind it. So the response that is received at the end of it, once the user confirms that they are okay to share their personal details, it is used for onboarding, and also the service is really useful in login or authentication, and is commonly used by the suites to onboard to public and also private sector dashboards and portals. Last but not least, for automation and improving the process of onboarding the customer specifically, we need to be talking about identity data verification. And yeah, oftentimes there are blockers that don't allow you to do identity document verification or EIDs. When it comes to identity document verification, there could be additional friction that you would not want to implement into your processes. When it comes to EIDs, it is generally subject to availability of an EID schema inside the country. But the alternative that can be offered is the identity data verification. In many countries, there are entities that basically provide the data that they have verified and collected over the years to use as a source of truth. You can collect the personal data of the customer by any means that you have, and by sending it, you can verify the validity and authenticity of that information against either governmental or commercial types of registries. So on your screen is generally how it goes, how the process goes. But to address the regulation side, you are allowed to verify customers' information against the reliable third party. So by the word reliable, what is implied is that the source has verified this information themselves to the extent required by the regulators, and then it can be used as a trusted source to reference your information. So what we do is we take personal data and send it to the partner company that is the local partner that actually has information on the residents inside this country. And they basically confirm that the information they have is matching their own records. In certain cases, we can even retrieve additional personal information. For instance, in Nordic countries, we can find like name, address, and other parameters by, for instance, personal identification number, or even search a person by the name that we have on them, and the system will give us the best matches. Now, what about fraud, and what can be done to stop it? Because that's another part of the verification. We are going to be talking about the latest technologies and rather the features that are used to verify authenticity of the user. And you can see with the red squares what products are going to be discussed with regards to that specific purpose of the KYC automation. Reeling back to, let's say, the most global solution, the ID and biometric verification. As an add-on to this product, there often comes a requirement that the user also needs to undergo so-called biometric or liveness check verification. And during the verification, the user is asked to basically take a short video of themselves most commonly. The purpose that it is done for is to verify that the user that is submitting the document is exactly the same who they say they are, because we will actually take the biometric portrait from the document and extract the portrait from the video and compare them between each other biometrically to tell that, yeah, the user sending us the information is the holder of that information, and the submission is done in real time. Additionally, this service ensures like extra security from fraud, because the liveness check ensures that we do have a live person standing behind the verification. And during the verification, we ask the user to do specific actions to perform to verify that they're authentic, in a sense that we want and have to prevent 3D face mask presentations, stuff like injected videos where somebody is using software to inject the video that they'd have downloaded or bought on the internet. Also competent stuff like AI nowadays, but for instance, stuff like Instagram masks and other masks that are altering the face structure. And of course, to combat any sort of stolen and purchased data, um, there are all specific mechanics that prevent each and every thing that I just mentioned. So to continue on the biometrics topic, now we will be talking at the EID side. And yeah, as I mentioned before, there are certain features like Face ID and thumbprint being used. Secure authentication overall is the key feature of the electronic identification products and EID suite as a whole. It is most commonly used specifically to log in to different portals in a secure way that you have 100% certainty that it is the person that the account belongs to is actually logging in, or rather doing certain actions with their account or their money there. So during the process itself, the customer will have to use their Face ID or a thumbprint. And traditionally, when we're talking about login and authentication to different platforms, we're talking about login and password, which is, of course, vulnerable to hacks. And even if you have like additional features like email or SMS to 2FA, those two can also be pretty easily abused. When hacked, if you're hacked, the email is oftentimes, or most of the times, will also be compromised too. So any 2FA falling into the email will basically just be useless. And then with the SMS, by statistics, people are most likely to basically be stolen from by their relatives. And that includes digital platform, digital banking. So sending an SMS to a phone is not 100% bulletproof, because oftentimes relatives do have access to the phone as well, and they can receive 2FA code to the phone of the other relative that they're basically trying to steal money from. And with all of those, let's say, restrictions or other vulnerabilities, in today's day and age, biometrics across the board are the hardest one to circumvent, especially when you're using inbuilt features like Face ID and thumbprint. When talking about any document processing, in today's day and age, we definitely need to be talking about spotting fraud and forgeries. And nowadays, you can find almost like any template of any document you want just with a quick Google search. And then you can go ahead and edit that for whatever information you want to be there. Or alternatively, I would say as a couple of years now, at least, the AI tools, they have been specifically designed to generate legitimate looking documents of all of the sorts, and those platforms have emerged also pretty much one Google search away. And it's with every day becoming more rational to employ certain features or tools that actually help you combat the fake documents that are being sent to you, be that identity documents or I don't know, incorporation documents on an entity. And the forgery techniques have long surpassed anything that you can catch with the naked eye, with the human eye, even with a trained one, because yeah, it's just impossible to notice without looking into more hidden details and then analyzing the information from a different angle. And in that sense, to be able to compete with AI and AI generated forgeries, you have to employ AI to actually be able to spot it and to use the contemporary tools that are giving you definitive results, and you can tell with 100% certainty whether you're dealing with authentic document or not, be that for onboarding a customer, for their ongoing reviews, or whatever submission that you have, even for internal reasons, as I mentioned, could be receipts, invoices. So typically fraud detection starts with, first and foremost, making sure that the document is worth processing. Like if it's just bad quality, there's nothing to realistically tell whether it was edited. Then the task is usually to classify the document itself, to be able to tell what sort of document is in front of us and how to verify it, to verify the authenticity of it. And generally, as a result, you should be able to definitively tell whether the document is forged. If so, then how exactly it was forged. Or on the other hand, be sure that the document is authentic and receive the confirmation of the authenticity. As mentioned before, the AML framework as a whole that governs KYC also requires financial institutions to perform the so-called PEP and sanction check. PEP meaning politically exposed persons once again. It's generally a process where you run a person against the list of people that are prohibited from receiving financial services, or yeah, sanctioned from specific actions, pretty much across the globe. And a good instance of that would be if somebody had ties with terrorism. They obviously cannot be provided from any service at all, or when it comes to PEPs, those usually require additional scrutiny and KYC checks. So to achieve efficiency and get the best results out of that specific vertical of the AML compliance, the companies require to have a partner that can provide access to the latest and most complete international lists that contain the official data on the PEP, sanctions, and terrorists. Everyone nowadays knows the power of US sanctions, and basically, to put it simple, providing services to people or companies that US doesn't want you to do is a bad idea, and that's where those lists are absolutely critical for your business. And countries, including the US, also constantly update their lists by adding people and removing them all the time. Therefore, in order to stay compliant with this requirement, you not only have to do the check at the beginning of your relationship, but you also have to proactively monitoring for any association of that person with the list. A person that you onboarded and checked today may become a politically exposed person, or worse, literally the next day. And it's not going to cut to the regulators that you didn't know or you didn't check that they have been added to that list at later point that the onboarding happened. And on top of the official government lists, when we're talking about these kinds of check, it also often includes the so-called person of interest, or usually it's called the adverse media check, where basically this layer monitors different publications, such as like journals like Forbes, all the way down to the local newspapers, be that even the small country like Estonia. Those are also monitored in terms of the biggest journals that we have here. So any negative mentions are basically being tracked and then categorized to be able to highlight also other risks that can be associated with that person that are that can or are impacting your business. So, for instance, you would want to know if somebody was found guilty of embezzling money, and you would also want to know if somebody was found guilty or tied in with trafficking of any kind. Now, to, let's say, refresh everything that I said, because it's been a lot, and to kind of summarize everything, financial services and also companies, just by their own nature, have the need and also legal obligations to perform KYC with many different requirements and frameworks within it, such as risk-based approach. So it all needs to be taken into account, and you have to be referring to the regulations that are specifically applied to your company. And to be able to effectively onboard people, you also need to have operational efficiency to achieve that compliance and to be able to process all of that information that you are collecting. And basically, automation turns the game upside down because when it comes to the individual, a customer opening an account with a, for instance, fintech, let's call it like that, they have a standard expectation of and patience of being onboarded maybe within like 10 minutes. If onboarding a customers take you an hour, the customer, by the time you have finished your KYC, has already registered and received service with your competition. That's simply how fierce and how fierce and tough it is nowadays when it comes to financial sector and specifically individual onboarding and providing services to that. Automation gives you reliable and verified results in real time, basically within seconds from hitting the servers to getting the full results back, instead of forms, processing, or manual rewriting of the data, God forbid. The KYC automation also gives you a level of assurance that is far beyond what any human can be trained to detect, simply because the forgeries and fakes are nowadays just that good. And when we're talking about, of course, any onboarding and fraud detection, we need to be also talking about optimizing your costs, first and foremost on the time that you spend onboarding, but also when it comes to fraud. So from the statistics that I've seen by Experian quite a while ago, each fraudulent account that was created with a bank averages for about $6,000 in losses for fraud, for money laundering, and also basically penalties that are also applied for letting that person that shouldn't have been banked actually do transactions. So preventing those losses, is also contingent on up-to-date data and monitoring for updates throughout the whole relationship of you and the customer. Regulators will not take "we didn't know" as the answer. It definitely takes more than just monitoring for the PEP and sanction that I mentioned, that you have to know updates of the official lists, but also same obligations are put onto the companies when it comes to just knowing even basic information like the name or the address. For instance, it is just legal for people to change their names, especially with marriage. Surname can change pretty often. So the obligation to have this information up to date is also enforced onto the regulated companies. And I reckon every one of you has faced at least once the annoying pop-up which asks you, is this still your number or is this still your address? And basically now you know exactly why it's done, because of the up-to-date requirement. Now, I will thank you for your patience and attention throughout this time. And yeah, I know it's been a lot to process. I will open the floor for the Q&A in chat for now. And of course, I will be happy to connect with any one of you for, yeah, further conversations if you're interested to hear more from me or us. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Sergei. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please add them to the chat. There are also solution sheets available in the hands-out section of the GoToWebinar, so take a look there. And we do have a recent blog post that you can refer to in the chat. I will give just a couple of more minutes for our questions to come in. All right, I see one. All right, Sergei, how can person verification help when onboarding solely businesses?
Yeah, good question. As I mentioned before, when we're talking about person onboarding, or rather when we're talking about entities onboarding and onboarding businesses, there's most often the requirement to also verify at least UBOs, but also officers and directors of the company that the services are provided to. So when that is done, obviously, we're always talking about also different solutions that are specifically tailored to onboarding people. Just to give you an anecdote, literally over the last, let's say, month, I had to update the KYC data with local bank. And I had to go there twice, spend two hours every time. Both of those could be an email because, yeah, it was about submitting personal information. And if there was, for instance, just a link for uploading an identity document with, for instance, a liveness check behind it, I would never have to spend that time. And I would also never spend the time of the lovely lady that had to punch in everything manually while I was literally sitting there for 2 hours. That's about how it goes.
Thank you. We have one more question. Thank you for your presentation. Could you please share how the automatic KYC takes place? In your invite email, there was a mention of smarter identity verification. Could you please explain it further?
Not sure if I'm understanding this specifically, what is implied here, but generally what happens is that when there is a prospect that comes to your platform, in order to be able to provide services to them, regulators require regulated companies to onboard them with the specific requirements like name, date of birth, etc. Oftentimes, this requirement comes not only with just collecting the data, which is usually the base requirement, but also verification of that data against, for instance, identity document, like a passport. So what we do is, for instance, the traditional onboarding is you come to the brick and mortar shop or a branch, you show your documents, verify that you are who you say you are, and then fill out forms to open like a bank account or something like that. Online solutions allow you to verify the identity without having the person in place to the extent that is equal with the brick and mortar shops, because yeah, that's how good modern solutions are. Apart from all that, there's no scanning, there's no manual inputs of information. You do get much more confidence in the authenticity of this documentation and the information that you have read from it, especially when you're implementing anti-fraud solutions. From my experience, whenever we have launched POCs with, for instance, verification of proof of address documents like utility bills, bank statements that the persons are sending to our merchants, we see at least 5-6% of fraud across the board, no matter what industry you're coming from. And that is just proof of address documents.
Interesting. All right, we have one more. Very interesting question, in my opinion. With AI generating very realistic ID docs and utility bills, can your tool identify if they're AI generated?
Yeah, that is specifically why it has been highlighted, because, well, from my personal experience, there was 2 years ago a huge, let's say, scandal. There was an investigation made by journalists that found out a website that is still available that you can go to, and for like $15 create a basically AI generated document. And those guys have been selling templates for Photoshop for like a decade or more. I don't know exactly, didn't look into that side of business to that depth, but generally it's already here. It's already being done without implementing KYC tools. Just a photo of the document will not give you pretty much any confidence in its authenticity. AI tools that we have today are capable of detecting AI generated documents because of the way that they are generating those. And no human eye can detect stuff like, for instance, small inconsistencies in the parallax of the camera lens because the Photoshop slightly distorts that. Or for instance, that some part of the document has a little bit of a different graining, or that the crevices of the paper itself are not consistent with the rest of the document. Those are things you cannot train to do. And I personally started my KYC journey from actually manual verification back when it wasn't like about automation, but still that was the beginning. And yeah, you just cannot see what fraudsters can create today.
Wonderful. Thank you. And unfortunately, we are at time. So any questions that we didn't get to today, we will absolutely answer them via email. We thank you all for joining us. We do hope that the insight today was very helpful to you. And G2 Risk Solutions team is here to support you. So please don't hesitate to reach out.